Hi guys, in today's video I will be explaining my process of how I create watercolor paintings as well as answer some frequently asked questions about watercolor. As you can see, whenever I start a watercolor painting I must have a palette ready with the colors that I need, and that helps me use the wet on wet technique to get a really smooth blend on the skin. I'm starting with really light washes of color to kind of help me understand where the color needs to go, and then later I build on it. As you can see, I then grab the green, and while the first layer is wet, I add it on top. Same going with the pink and purples, and using this technique it makes the colors blend together. And with areas that are a bit darker or have more saturation, I'm not really shy about that, and I will go in with a color that's more concentrated, like around the eyes for example. And at first the texture is kind of overwhelming and it looks scary to work with, but when it dries the texture lightens up and it's not that bad, and the colors blend even better when they dry. Sometimes when you add a darker color it doesn't really blend that well with the rest of the wet paper, so what I do is I place the colors next to each other as you can see, and then with a clean brush I just try to feather out the edge so it's like I'm blending it with just water. Even when this paper is not completely dry, I would go in and add more saturation to certain parts, like example for this part right here. And the reason I love this paper is because the drying time is elongated, which kind of helps me use this technique. Someone actually asked me, does the quality of watercolors, paints matter more or less than the skill? And it honestly depends on what you're trying to achieve. Like for example, I don't think I can get this result with other paper, and whenever I use this technique on other papers the results are always different. I think both play a big factor on how your painting will turn out. Like I for sure use student grade and cheap materials and produced images like this one. I was happy with the result of it, but now like using materials that are better quality just makes it easier and the process faster to learn, as well as achieve the look that you actually want. Once I put that first initial layer down, I let that completely dry, and as you can see when it completely dries the texture becomes better and smoother, and when it dries that's when I start building up the shadows. I slowly add saturation and I repeat the process. So I would add a layer, let it dry and just build on top to add a lot of contrast. And I repeat the method for the forehead again. I'm gonna show you in real-time speed, so I'll add the darker color and then I'll place the other color next to it, which is a more reddy tone in this instant, and this is how long it takes me to kind of like mix a new color and place it down. I really like this paper because of how long it takes to dry. But again, it does work with other paper. Like if you're working in sections, like for example in this section I was doing the forehead, pre-mix the colors so it's ready. To help blend that edge, I'll clean my brush with water and then I'll dry it damp and just buff the edge of that. A lot of people were asking me what materials do I recommend for beginners, and before this I was actually using the Van Gogh watercolors. I bought it for £12 off of Amazon with 3 extra pans. I'll add like a screenshot, but honestly I was really surprised by the quality of it. It blends so nicely together because they're not granulating, and when you wet them they wet very easily, unlike the ones in Newton. And ever since I started using them, I saw a drastic change in my skill because they were just so easy and fun to use, which made you want to use them. And no, I'm not sponsored, I just really love these paints. A year and a half later, I actually invested in Danny Smith watercolors because everyone has been raving about them, and yeah, they're nice. But yeah, I decided to use them for this portrait. Here I am using my Mossery watercolor sketchbook, but usually when I'm working with like loose paper I am using the Hanamule, is that how you say it? I don't know, but the Hanamule paper, and it's amazing. Honestly, for the price you get so much paper and I just love how it blends, the texture of it, everything about it. Honestly, to begin with, you need to try it out. Honestly, whenever I think that I'm done with adding the shadows and building up the contrast, I'll add something else, for example, the eyes or the background, and without them, it almost felt like there was an illusion, making it seem like it's darker than it is. So even when I add in the eyes or the hair, for example, I always go back in, and the footage I had for this video came up to just less than 3 hours, so that's how long it took me to kind of add and build on this watercolor. So you do need a lot of patience for art in general, but I definitely think I work quicker now with the right materials than I did before, and obviously with more practice. A question I also get asked about frequently is how to avoid achieving muddy results. It happens a lot to me when I was using cheaper paper, especially ones that were made out of cellulose, because it was harder to kind of layer with cellulose and the layers would get disrupted, and when they disrupt, obviously the layers would get irritated, the colors would move around, and you wouldn't be able to glaze over the colors that you wanted. And most cheap papers are made out of cellulose. Another question I get asked a lot is how to prevent the paper from actually getting bumpy, and the answer is just using good quality paper. Unfortunately, I found with thicker papers that I then tape down on a board helps reduce like the bumpiness. But for example, this paper, it's in my sketchbook, so I can't really stick it down to a board, so it does get bent, but I don't mind that much. I even find myself finding the paper becoming bumpy even with good quality paper though, so I'm really not sure. The last question I'm gonna answer is, how do you preserve the white bits within the painting? Honestly, even at the beginning, you can see that I kind of forgot and I painted over the highlights. Usually I try to draw where the highlights are so I can avoid them, but I do end up painting over them. For example, the nose highlights, they're gone. But usually I use a white gel pen. I use the one from Uniball, or I use white ink, and the ink I use is from Winsor & Newton, and I just use a thin brush. So that's all I wanted to talk about today. I hope you enjoyed the rest of the video. I'm going to speed it up, add some background music, and yeah, I hope you enjoy the rest of the speed paint of Hyunjin. Please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my YouTube channel, and I'll be back with another video. Bye.